All right, now, same car, 1999 Chrysler 300M. We let this car go a long time without fixing any particular problems on it. That's why this has appeared so many times now, because, it's probably, years of backlogs of problems we didn't take care of. And finally got to the point where we had to fix some things, and then you know how it is. You fix one thing, well, then you might as well fix something else. So the other thing we got going on here is we have to replace the rear wheel ABS sensor, at least according to our scanning tool. So that is what we'll get to next. It's pretty easy to take off the back part, the part that's on the, goes to the wheel. On this ABS sensor, right where I'm shining that flashlight there, and I'm having a hard time telling if this is actually showing up on the video screen here. Let me just try it this way. Okay. There is an ABS sensor there, and it's that one nut. It's just one, or rather bolt, holding that on. That's all you have to do to take it out of the back. They'll tend to be frozen in there and difficult to remove. But the good news is, if it's bad, you don't really have to worry about breaking it. The hard part about this is it goes up, this wire goes up into the car itself, this wire right here. So you have to remove the back seat. So we're going to have to figure out how to do that, because we have to unplug that wire. Unfortunately, the plug isn't out here, it's inside the car. So we're going to work on finding out how to get that back seat out so we can get to this, and then we'll show you how to replace that. Okay, there's some amount of good news. You do not have to remove the back seat. At least it's looking that way right now. Looks like all we have to do is you fold the rear seat down, pull a little bit up on this carpet, and there it is. You just unplug it like that, and we're going to do the test here on this. It's supposed to have a certain amount of ohms of resistance. I can't remember the amount, but we are going to check that and see if that's bad. Alrighty, 2 bits of good news. We found where the connection was, and we didn't have to tear the whole car apart to get to it. We got 0 ohms when we tested the one that was on the car, and I think the spec was 1400 ohms. And we tested the new one, and the new one was within spec. So we got a reading on the new one and didn't on the old one. So I think we can be fairly confident that we're going down the right track, and the old one actually was bad. So now we're at the point of how difficult is it to replace. And so we're working down here now. And pretty much all I had to do is just pull on this wire to pull out this and the grommet. And then up in here, you wouldn't be able to see it with the camera, but there's a little fork kind of doo-woppy that just goes over that. Easy enough to pull out. Then back here, I'm not going to show you again because it's hard to get the camera angle, but you saw it when I was showing you where that bolt was. I have to take the bolt off to remove this ABS sensor. So that's what I'm going to do next. All right, we're back. Now, we're lucky about a couple things. The new part looks like the old part, so we're in good shape there. I do want to show you something here. This part came out of this hole right here, okay? It went right in like this. Let me just stick it back in so you can see that. All right, now, I only saw 2 videos that covered this, changing the rear wheel sensor on Chrysler 300M or similar cars. And most of them were, the 2 of them, they weren't the best. One of them, the guy did explain how to get this part out, which I thought was pretty helpful. This wheel sensor goes right through this hole here, okay? And I've already pounded it out, but that's where it goes through. And right here, that much of this stainless steel part goes through this hole right here. So you'll just see the end of this stainless steel sticking out. And the guy who had the video on it was the most helpful. He suggested removing the rotor, okay, and removing this hub. So you got to take off the brake caliper, you take off the rotor. There is a keeper for this nut with a cotter pin. You got to take that off. There's this little spring washer behind it. Then this big nut here comes off, and there's a washer. You take that off, and then you can take this bearing off. So bearing and hub assembly. Now, once you do that, this piece here will be sticking through this hole right there. And you pretty much have to do this. Maybe if you live down south, you can pull that in from the back, but I did not see any way I could possibly pull that out from the back without doing what this one guy with this other video suggested. He said put a socket that fits over that right there, so it'd be right here, and just pound it through with a hammer, and that actually worked quite well. It does not take that long to take off this caliper and take off that nut, so you can take off your rotor and take off that nut so you can pull off this hub. And it's the only way I think you'll be able to do it, particularly if you want to save this part. I kind of destroyed this part trying to pound it with a punch between the hub and the brakes there, the emergency brake. But the part was shot anyway, but if this was a good part, I would have ruined it. But even doing it that way, without having to worry about ruining the part, I still couldn't get it out. So I had to do what that one other video suggested, is put the socket over and pound it out. Now I'm going to show you fine folks one other thing here that will come in handy for things other than this particular job, because that's what this channel is all about. It's not really focusing on any one particular job, but how to make things in your life easier as time passes. Things that will apply to other jobs. And if you ever have a situation where you need to have a small bore cleaned out, something that's smaller than you can fit any kind of drum sander in, what works really good is you take a piece of emery cloth and rip it and stick it in the cotter pin. And then you take a drill and you just chuck the cotter pin in your drill. All right, and then you just roll it in the same direction as the drill turns. So that way when it turns, it doesn't try to unfold on you. And then you can stick that in your hole here. And then you just run it. And this will get that shiny enough, get enough rust off it that you'll be able to get the new one in without ruining it. And you can see my cordless drill is already weak. It doesn't have much battery power left. That's why I'm not a big fan of cordless drills. So now we'll put a little bit of anti-seize compound on our new part and see if we can push it through. Alright, so I'm going to put a little bit of anti-seize compound on here. So if for any reason someone has to take it apart, they might actually be able to get it taken apart. The good news on the stuff I work on is I try to make it so if anybody ever has to work on it again, it'll be easier than if you didn't take the precautions that I take. The bad news is that most of the stuff I work on it's so old, it has so many miles, that chances are, you know, no one's going to be taking it apart again. But as you saw, after I cleaned that up with that piece of emery cloth and that cotter pin, and I put some anti-seize compound on it, that just plugged right in, went in quite easily. So if for any reason this ever has to be taken apart, I bet it'll come apart certainly easier than it came apart for us. Now I'm going to put a little bit of anti-seize compound on this retaining screw. And that goes right in from the back here. Probably quite difficult to see on camera. There's a little hole in this bracket that goes through this part to the side, right to the side of the sensor itself. And the retaining screw goes through that. Things are kind of tight here. You got kind of a track arm here that's in the way. You got a strut that's in the way. It's not the most accessible thing in the world, but relative to cars made after the early 70s, I guess it's fairly easy to work on, but still pretty tight. So now I'll tighten down my retaining screw here. All right, that looks good. Now, if you remember when I was taking it apart, I said that this part here goes through a fork. This exact same piece is on the car. New part, it's nice enough that they give you a separate retaining bracket. But I'm going to use the original one because otherwise I'd have to try to unplug that one. So as long as the original one's there, which is right up here, you can't see it, but you can see what it looks like when I showed you the new one. So all I really did is, I'll show you on the old part here. All I was doing there, and there's no way we could have got a camera in there. I was just pushing that in there like that. That's all I was doing. Now there's a hole right about in this area that goes into the trunk of the car. So we'll feed this lead up through there. And the next thing I'm going to do, once again, the camera can't really reach this angle, so I'm just going to show you. There's this grommet here. So I push this up through the hole in the trunk floor, and I'll just try and get this grommet to seat in that hole, okay? So that's what I'm doing here right now. I mean, I can't even get my head in to see it, let alone a camera. So you pretty much got to do it by feel. And fortunately, it wasn't that difficult. Okay, now getting back here, the main concern we had on this car of doing this job, the thing we were worried about, was that we might have to remove the back seat to do the job. Fortunately, we didn't have to do that. All we had to do was pull the rear seat down, and then this carpet here on the trunk floor, we just pulled that up, and here is the piece that I just fed through. This is the supply. Okay, we unhooked that when we took out the old one. And it only plugs together one way. So you just try to plug it together. If it doesn't plug together on you, you just flip it around and put it on the other direction. But in this case, we did it right on the first try. So that pretty much takes care of everything on this job, with the exception of just putting everything back together. Putting that rear hub on, putting the brake rotor on, putting the caliper on, and putting the wheel on. And God, on this car, how many times have we shown that already? So probably not going to go through that again. But if you liked what you saw here, I'd appreciate it if you liked, shared, subscribed. You know the drill. Everything to make this the #1 channel on YouTube. If you have any criticisms or any suggestions on how I could have done this job better, put it in the comments below. And we'll see you again next time on the Fix Yourself channel.